Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Policy Exchange. My name's Guy Newey. I'm Head of Environment and Energy at Policy Exchange, and delighted to see so many of you here. We're also delighted we didn't manage to clash with an England football game, although I'd like to say that was due to excellent planning, but it wasn't. So it will have escaped no one's attention in Westminster that energy bills and the rising energy bills have become a kind of acute political problem in recent years, and this has created a huge dilemma for politicians and those of us who work in the policy space about how do you get bills down while meeting aggressive climate targets. So the traditional approach, the way of squaring these, has been kind of hard energy efficiency measures, things like installing cavity walls, solid walls, the role of standards. A few nudges where they've been tried have been things on appliances, and fridges, etc. And combination of these things, including, of course, a very aggressive rising price, has led to quite a dramatic reduction in domestic household energy use since 2004, which is not widely appreciated, I don't think, in the energy debate, and to a certain extent not well understood which of those different factors have been important. There's been less attention on behavioural measures, how they can help people to stop wasting energy in their home without necessarily changing the fabric of their household. And there's some reasons for a kind of reluctance in this area. One has been, do they deliver real savings? Can we be sure about them? And there's also an understandable reluctance from politicians about telling people what they should do in their home. And often there's dangers they can get themselves into trouble if they tell people what they should do. But things have started to change in recent years, and this opens up quite an interesting policy area. One, there's some good, improved understanding of what behavioural economics can tell us about how we use energy in the home. There's been some good studies, some good analysis, better data analysis techniques, and as well we have some overseas experience of what has been successful. About a year ago we did a report called Smarter, Greener, Cheaper, which looked in part at kind of wider energy efficiency policy, but also the behaviour change side. And the evidence on how much this stuff costs is patchy. There's been some trials, some of them not brilliant, some of them very useful, but there are potentially some very cheap ways of not just reducing energy use, but cheap ways of cutting carbon. And if you're an organisation like Policy Exchange who's kind of obsessed with cost effectiveness and how we can get greener, cheaper, this is very important. So one of the things we recommended, and hopefully be part of the discussion tonight, is whether behavioural measures should be able to compete for subsidy, for energy company obligation subsidy. And in the world of smart meters, which we're coming to over the next few years in the UK, that seems like a big opportunity. But concerns remain. Do they deliver real and sustained savings, these kind of behavioural programmes? And also this kind of wider concern about how effective the smart meter rollout will be. We've got a wonderful panel to discuss some of these issues. Our first speaker will be Greg Barker, who's been MP for Bexhill and Battle since 2001, and Minister of State in DEC since the start of the coalition, which I think, Greg, you said makes you the longest serving energy minister in
20 years.
20 years, which, yes. And, well, congratulations on that. And as you all know, he's been a kind of tireless champion for energy efficiency and for the climate action on climate change for much longer than that. Our second speaker will be Alex Lasky, who's president and founder of O-Power. I'm sorry to say that before he did something useful with his life, he swam in the murky waters of policy and politics. So there's hope for us all. Alex is in charge of O-Power's...
American politics are not murky or muddy. It's very clean.
Yes, I'm sure you can convince us of that later as well. Yeah, Alex is in charge of O-Power's relationships with utilities and governments, as well as their international expansion, and I'm sure he's going to talk about O-Power's experience in various different markets. Our final speaker is Jonathan Reynolds, who's MP for Stalybridge and Hyde. I hope I've pronounced that right.
I've pronounced that correctly.
That's not all. Others have, yes, others have made mistakes, but I won't name names. He's a member of the Shadow Energy team, as we know. Before joining Parliament in 2010, he worked for James Purnell, whose seat he took over and also worked as a solicitor. He's also been, since he took over the role, another strong advocate for action on climate change. So I'm going to get each of our speakers to speak for around 7 or 8 minutes. I'm going to be quite tight for time, and then we'll have time for Q&A. Greg has to go and have dinner with the Chinese delegation this evening, I'm told, so may have to leave just after 7, but he's promised some extra time. But we should have plenty of time for questions beyond there. I encourage you to tweet away in the meantime, but I'm going to start with asking Greg to speak first. Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, we all know that energy efficiency has been bang smack at the middle of this coalition's energy policy. In fact, it's been elevated to a degree which we really haven't seen before. We now have an national energy efficiency strategy, and actually within the department, we actually have a energy efficiency unit that for the first time elevates energy efficiency to sit alongside more traditional energy norms of oil and gas, nuclear and renewables. So energy efficiency has matured a great deal under the current coalition, but there's still a long way to go. We've only just begun to scratch the surface of the potential. But the thing that's very different about energy efficiency compared to, say, building a nuclear power plant, obviously, is it's not something you can just do to people. If you're going to be really successful, if you're going to get the maximum potential for energy efficiency in the economy, then you have to work with consumers. And on the agenda of energy efficiency, it's fundamental to success of any policy that you're able to work with the grain and pattern of behaviour, and you're fundamentally able to influence behaviour in a positive way, whether through purchasing decisions or even down to basic choices of how people choose and to heat their rooms. Well, today I want to just focus on 3 things. Firstly, where we are on energy efficiency and behaviour change, up to date. Secondly, how we're driving competition and innovation into that market. And thirdly, how the key to the future is empowering households with user-friendly technology. Now, to my first point, we know that the best way to bring down energy bills is through driving greater efficiency. And the UK's first energy efficiency strategy last year represented a step change in the way we view energy consumption and highlighted the successes we're already seeing. Already, we should remind ourselves that the UK is the least energy-intensive economy in the G8 and was 39% less energy-intensive than the G8 average in 2012. And last year, investment stimulated by energy efficiency policies reduced household and business energy bills by a cumulative £4 billion. In 2011-12, it created sales of more than £18 billion, sales expected to grow by 5% per year up to 2017. And in the UK, we believe that energy efficiency-related work accounts for about 136,000 jobs. And through investment in energy efficiency, DEC estimates we could save 196 terawatt hours in 2020. I had no idea what that meant. But that is equivalent to the output of a massive 22 power stations. Now, thanks to the energy company obligation to the Green Deal market, cumulatively together, 790,000 measures have now been installed in 660,000 properties, domestically speaking. That's 660 households who go to bed each night with warmer, better insulated homes. And Green Deal assessments are mobilising even more action than that. These assessments, these new innovations on the policy landscape, are really at the forefront of helping deliver not just installations of measures, but behaviour change. As the latest DEC research published earlier today shows, over 2/3 of households report that they're taking measures or intending to take action to install energy efficiency measures following an assessment. But the bit that perhaps doesn't show up so much in the figures is each assessment should actually include a conversation about how people live in their homes and how they choose to heat and run them. Now, last week we launched the Green Deal Home Improvement Fund by requiring the installation of a package of measures in order to qualify for the incentives. We are driving, slow but sure, a whole house approach where the carbon savings will be greater than if they're just limited to one intervention, such as replacing a boiler. So this is all about our range of policies, which together from different angles are designed to inspire and encourage households to take action to reduce their demand. But understanding consumer behaviour, which is a process which is never complete, which is always ongoing, and understanding which nudges work the best is absolutely vital to the continued success of any policy. Now, working with the John Lewis Group, we're testing whether lifetime running costs information, for example, leads to people buying more energy efficient consumer products, such as washing machines and tumble dryers. In Newcastle, we are testing whether in-home advice on how to operate heating controls leads to social tenants reducing their gas consumption. And we are testing whether behavioural insights, such as a pre-commitment to reduce energy use, could be used alongside our ambitious smart meter rollout, which is really going to kick in the second half of this decade. And that rollout is going to replace 53 million old meters with smart electricity and gas meters in all homes and smart meters in smaller non-domestic sites, impacting in total a staggering 30 million premises. But there's still much, much more to do. And so much more cost-effective potential remains untapped. And innovation in the product marketplace with new technologies such as Nest, the Hive, Chop Clock, and many others, is stimulating new consumer interests in products that have always been regarded as boring or cumbersome or just really gone unnoticed before. And it's certainly my ambition, and I'm sure shared across the industry, that we can inject a much greater sense of excitement into the energy sector with the advent of these new consumer-facing technologies. People are intrinsically excited and intrigued by the tech sector. The energy sector has lumbered behind it. But now, technological innovation is drawing in a younger audience, and giving people not only greater control, but a greater sense of interest in their energy bills and energy consumption. And we would expect to see a continued reduction in energy consumption as this innovation kicks in and takes it to the next level. Now, to my second point, and an important part of shifting behavioural patterns is driving greater competition into the market. The number of domestic customers with independent suppliers has more than doubled in the last 3 years. There have been 11 new entrants since December 2010, including one that now has 800,000 customers. According to industry figures, between October last year and February, nearly 500,000 consumers switched their electricity account to one of the smaller suppliers. So what does all this new competition mean for actually changing behaviour? Well, it means we're going to see a completely new model of enterprise in the energy system through greater demand reduction, through demand response technologies, and also through a much greater take-up of distributed energy, or what they call in the United States the D3 agenda, pooling together demand reduction, demand response, and decentralised energy. Now, just very briefly, distributed energy is set now, because of the falling prices of these technologies, to unleash a genuine power to the people revolution at scale, driving down costs for consumers, as well as putting pressure on traditional utility business models. Already local and community generation is rapidly spreading and crucially getting much more cheaper. And this is the crucial bit, getting cheaper. Encouraging households to look at domestic renewables like solar panels, something I'll be discussing over dinner with Chinese counterparts tonight. Since 2010, over 500,000 homeowners have put solar panels on their roofs. That means over 1 million people now are waking up each morning with solar power already generating on their roofs. And solar PV is on the cusp of reaching an extraordinary 4 gigawatts of installed capacity in the UK, up from just a few megawatts when I came into office. And in addition, thanks largely to mass production of batteries for electric vehicles, solar plus battery systems will soon help to drive further demand for distributed energy, enabling consumers to create their own utility in a box without compromising reliability. Now, to help drive this forward, earlier this year, my department launched the UK's first ever community energy strategy with a bold vision, where community projects could supply enough electricity, we believe, for up to a million homes by 2020. That's what we're aiming for, 1 million homes supplied by community energy by 2020. And in addition, we've got an increased focus on the mid-size market. Exporting their excess on a competitive commercial basis will play a central role in growing the distributed energy market. There's also significant potential for greater electrical efficiency in the UK. That's why last year we announced the energy demand reduction pilot to unleash the power of what's called the negawatt, championed by Amory Lovins and the Rocky Mountain Institute. And in addition to support and growing the demand side response market in the UK, to help us get through winter peaks, National Grid is launching a new balancing service this year. Now, my final point. The key to driving behavioural change of the future is empowering households through the adoption of this new tech and user-friendly technology. The rollout of smart meters will replace those 53 million meters by 2020, bringing an end to estimated billing, and will put control firmly in the hands of the consumer with real-time information that they'll understand and will be meaningful to them. Consumers will know how much their energy is costing without having to wait for a bill sometimes months later. Households will be able to experiment with behaviour and lifestyle changes to bring bills down, and how they can save money through seemingly small changes. We're going to make switching supplier easier and more reliable. They'll let people change how they pay for gas or electricity, such as from credit to pay-as-you-go without charging meters and increasing competition. Time of use tariffs, home automation and energy analysis could help consumers avoid more waste. Innovative technologies are coming onto the market which could help households control their heating systems better via their laptops or their smartphones. And we need to learn more about the complex relationship between heating controls, the way people use them, and the potential energy wastage benefits. We also know that these technologies are not always as user-friendly as they could be. Events like today's are important so that we can share learning and insight. Apps can tell a consumer how much they spent using a tumble dryer last month or send an alert if energy is being wasted when no one's home. Innovations helping to facilitate faster switching between suppliers and put consumers in control in their bills. We're even looking at simpler billing to get a language that's much more comprehensible to consumers, to introduce supermarket-style competition to energy once and for all. So in conclusion, this coalition government's putting in place the foundations to unlock even greater low-carbon innovation, creating new growth as part of our long-term economic plan. Smarter, more integrated solutions being developed that will be the lifeblood of an affordable, secure energy system. But at the heart of this all is understanding behaviour change and doing this with consumers, alongside consumers, not to consumers. Thank you.
I can promise you this is not my speech, but this is just a stack of papers I've been carrying with me this week. Thank you very much, Guy, for hosting us. It's a great honor and privilege to be here with two distinguished members of Parliament, and it's good and refreshing to be in a place where members of different parties can sit together on stage, and I wasn't put in the middle to separate them either.
It may have been a mistake. We don't know.
Yeah, I'm happy to switch. But it's coming from Washington, D.C., where I live. It is a refreshing change, and I was pleased to see the sunshine too, and slightly surprised as well. So I thought maybe useful, and Guy suggested that I talk a little bit about O-Power, the company I founded after I realized that I wasn't very good at politics, and the impact that we've had, and a little bit about my conclusions for what that means for the UK and Europe generally from a policy perspective. 7 years ago, or 7.5 years ago, I, with a partner, decided to start to commit my life to trying to improve the environment. And we looked at energy, of course, as the big opportunity. And we were living in San Francisco. Nearly everybody who was an entrepreneur focused on energy was focused on the supply side because it was sexy and because the opportunities were immense. And we looked and realized that the demand side had just as much promise and opportunity, if less sex appeal. One of the things we appreciated, having come from politics and my co-founder from software background, was that all of the approaches on the efficiency side were hardware focused. Utilities were and remain run appropriately so by electrical and mechanical engineers, and policymakers, also the folks in the bureaucracy at these ministerials and in the regulators in the US tend to have a bent towards hardware. But we were living in Silicon Valley and realized that there was a huge opportunity to bring software and information services to this space. Because in conducting surveys of public opinion, and you can look at them here in the US and anywhere in the world, and we had a delegation in from China, so I know it's true also in China, nearly everybody thinks saving energy is a good idea. There are a few people out there on the street who think that wasting energy is a good idea. But at the same time, next to none of them wake up in the morning and think, what can I do to save energy today? How can I avoid wasting energy? Because as the minister said, energy is boring. It's relatively uninteresting. It's next to unintelligible, the information we get about our energy consumption. And so though people's inclinations and, is to do the right thing, they're lacking in the information and data they need. So we studied behavioral science. We looked at a lot of things, and we sort of came to this intuition that if we could give people better context to understand their consumption, we could show them how their energy consumption compared to neighbors in similar-sized homes, and then when we hired a bunch of people out of Amazon.com, take the best in Amazon.com. Who here has shopped at Amazon before, or Amazon.co.uk or whatever it is? So nearly everyone. And they sell millions of products on their website. But when each of us gets emails, we don't get a digest of a million products. We get specific recommendations that are made for us based on what we've purchased in the past, what books we read and so on, or at least what books we purchase, even if we don't read them. I don't think it's just Americans who don't read the books they buy. But, and so we combine these two disciplines, behavioral science and data analytics, to provide people context to understand their energy consumption and then targeted tips and recommendations to help people save in their homes. Today, 7 years later, we have 24 people, including Simon Clare and Andreas in our London office, and we're 560 people worldwide. We're working with 95 utilities in 9 countries, and we just listed on the New York Stock Exchange. So for a lot of reasons, the business has been successful. But to me, the thing I remain most proud of is why we started the business, which was to have an impact. To date, we've generated nearly 5 terawatt hours, and I only barely know what a terawatt hour is, but 5 terawatt hours of energy savings. And over the last 12 months, it's been more than 2.5 terawatt hours. By sometime later this year or early next, we'll be producing 4 terawatt hours a year in energy savings. And to put that in context, who here has been to the Hoover Dam or seen a picture of it in the U.S.? So the Hoover Dam is this massive structure, one of the great wonders of the modern world. It was built during the Depression by 7,000 men over the course of nearly 8 years. The cement that's in the middle of the Hoover Dam, which was poured in 1936, I think, is still wet. It hasn't dried yet. The Hoover Dam produces approximately 3.9 terawatt hours of electricity a year. And by the end of this year, or early next, our little software company will be producing more than 4 terawatt hours, so more than the Hoover Dam. And we're just getting started. when we've begun work in Europe, we're working with E.ON and First Utility here in the UK. We're working with EDF in Paris, where I was yesterday visiting with them. But the truth is that we're just scratching the surface here. McKinsey looked at the data that we had and data across Europe and calculated that more than 20% of the electricity that's used in people's homes here in Europe is wasted. And by wasted, I don't mean that people are watching lousy TV, though they may, or that people have inefficient appliances or poorly insulated walls, though they do. What I mean is that 20% of the electricity that's used in homes goes to light unoccupied rooms or heat empty homes. And so that's the opportunity that we're focused on. This electricity that's consumed but does not contribute to anybody's well-being, but of course contributes to climate change. To put it in perspective, our program alone, our program alone, if deployed across Europe, and we just at the moment get a fraction of that 20%, but we're working to do better, would reach 149 million homes. It would drive more than 12 terawatt hours a year in energy savings and produce nearly 2.5 billion euros of savings that stays in people's pockets. In the UK, it's roughly 2 terawatt hours a year. And to translate it into something that we can all understand, that's enough energy to power every home in Manchester and Birmingham combined and still leave enough for a couple of other small towns and villages. Or alternatively, and perhaps less inspiringly, to power Buckingham Palace for 100 years. I hope that Buckingham Palace is powered for more than 100 years, but maybe it can become more efficient. And it's roughly 250 million pounds per year in savings that would stay in the pockets of ordinary homeowners and renters here in the UK, ordinary families. So I'm eager to get involved in policy discussion and to answer questions and to respond to different perspectives here. From my perspective as an outsider looking in, it's terrific that the coalition government has focused on efficiency, and we were very flattered in 2009. I think we were a company of less than 50 people, and Prime Minister Cameron, before he was Prime Minister, gave a TED Talk in which he highlighted our work as an example of the kind of better government and better information services and the application of behavioral science. So that was I think that was our first introduction to David Cameron as sort of naive Americans, but it was a great honor, and then to see him elected. So this government's embrace of behavioral science is unique in the world, although no longer unique in that it has been leading, but now there are thankfully several other governments across the planet that are following. But when it comes to efficiency, I think there are some opportunities for improvement. And I'm quite compelled and excited by the Green Deal and by the recent simplification of the Green Deal. But all the same, the Green Deal has reached at the moment less than 0.1% of UK households. And surely many more people need it. Nobody disagrees. From my perspective, looking in, there is a huge opportunity to reward suppliers for achieving outcomes rather than just putting in inputs. There was an obsession for a while in this country and others with in-home displays. Everybody thought, well, if you just put a display in somebody's house as you roll out smart meters and you give somebody an EKG of their energy use in real time, that will motivate them to change their behavior and enable them to change their behavior. The studies are now well documented that for most households, those new displays end up in the drawer within 6 months, and they have no sustained impact on energy consumption.
Alex, sorry, can you bring it to concluding?
Okay, so yeah, sorry. So to me, the big opportunity is to reward and actually hold accountable the suppliers for achieving efficiency rather than for installing technology. To do this, to include behavior in in all the energy efficiency frameworks, not just include hardware, but include information and behavior, and to include it in all of the potential studies that are being done as the consideration of reframing the framework. So I apologize for going long. I'm eager for the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you very much, everyone, for being here, and thank you, Guy, for the invitation. I'll try and be reasonably brief so we can fit in perhaps some questions before the Chinese come for you, Greg, and take you from us. I heard they're investing in our. Yeah, I heard the Chinese are investing in our national assets, and what can I say, Greg? That must be why they have you here. But I mean, the question I think that we're discussing tonight really is, can behavioural change stop people wasting energy? We talk a lot about measures. Can we talk about how people's behaviour can do that? And I think the answer for all of us, certainly for me, is I hope so. You know, I want a system where people are much more dynamic, they're conscious, they're aware of their energy use, rather than perhaps what we've had for some time, which is quite a passive, quite a disempowered model, where people really haven't been able to get the best deals, even if they've wanted to find them. But really what I thought in preparation for coming this evening was, I think for me, there are some things that we need to do to make that happen. And the first thing is, we need greater customer awareness of their energy use. When I finished being a shadow energy minister down here for the week, one of the things I always try and fit in when I go back to my constituency are kind of energy roadshows, which I do quite a lot of. I actually love energy that much that I take it home with me to Staley Bridge and Hyde. And actually, people are really interested. That's the good bit. People are genuinely really interested, but they find it quite hard to find reliable information that they trust, because perhaps they don't always trust that from some of the sources they tend to buy their energy from. And actually, the most common question is not about government policy, about Green Deal or eco. It's not about technology, solar PV or whatever. The most common question people ask genuinely is, is it more efficient to leave my heating on permanently on a low thermostat setting, or on the clock on the setting at which I really want it? And they want to access that information. I think we need to find a way of getting it to them. Now, smart meters should be a game changer. They should be a huge breakthrough, and it is quite exciting, some of the trials as to the energy reduction that they've brought about. But I think, for me, it's quite important to say some of the really important bits of the smart meter program will come from the changes that people perhaps won't see, the changes behind the scenes, particularly to the settlement system, because I think whilst there's clearly an incentive for you as a customer to reduce your usage if it reduces your bills, at the minute in the UK there aren't really that many incentives on suppliers to find a way to really push that. If your gas and your electricity are settled through estimates, particularly through gas, which is even more less precise than power. And I think Ofgem is working on that. I think there are some good work underway to deliver that. But for me, it's particularly important, because what we really need to get to on the smart programme is the phase beyond that, where we have smart appliances, where we rely much more on smart controls, where it's quite feasible people could, increase their thermostat or turn something on and find out in real time what that will cost them if they continue to do that for the rest of the month or the rest of their billing period. And I think it's even more crucial when you consider the discussion around time of use tariffs, because frankly, if time of use tariffs are simply seen by people as increasing the cost of power when they really need it, at peak times when they come in from work, that will be hugely unpopular, and actually there'll be a huge kickback from the public against that. What we really need is a way to price people in to areas of lower demand, and actually through smart we could do that, I think, in quite an accessible way, and that, I think, for me is the most exciting thing behind this. My other point in the main is that actually if we want to make this a big deal, we've got to make government policy more consumer friendly. I know Greg would be disappointed if I didn't come up with a few criticisms of government policy while I'm here, but if you look at both eco and the Green Deal, they're very poor customer experiences at the minute. I mean, eco is extremely bureaucratic. It's very frustrating from a customer point of view. If you think about how we advertise that, we have adverts saying, oh, you want benefits, you can get a free boiler. It's not great for the brand value. It's not great for social cohesion either, actually, in terms of presenting it in that way. And on the Green Deal, I mean, it's quite awful unless you've got some expertise, some energy expertise to get it done. The upfront costs are there. The offer isn't particularly an attractive one. It's actually even quite hard to find a supplier if you go online and find it, simply because so many people are bidding for what is at the minute quite a small amount of work. And I think, to be honest, even the name isn't particularly strong from a customer point of view. It doesn't get across what this is about. It's not about greenery for most people. It's not about, I think deal is not a great word either. It's about people being able to take control and get a more affordable control of their energy usage. And surely there's a way we can do that would make it more popular. I think there's also actually a lot of scope we could extend on the Green Deal. I mean, heating controls, the innovation there is quite astounding in terms of what's being developed at the minute. And actually including some of those, I know there's the difficulties around the golden rule about what if people take measures they've installed with them. But, we can get around that for house moving for a whole range of issues. I think there's a way we could expand those measures that would actually, I think, make it more popular, because people would see it as a way to access some of the more sexy stuff that perhaps is out there on the market. Just some points of caution, I think, required before we go into questions. The first one for me is, look, our housing stock is so poor in this country that it needs improving whether or not we are successful with widespread behaviour change. And actually diverting subsidy towards behaviour change when our housing stock is in such poor condition relative to other European countries, I think is quite difficult. We may have to find a way of expanding the support if we're going to really do this. Second one is, I know feed-in tariffs for energy efficiency are extremely popular in the sector, and intellectually I think we'd all buy the case, and it is quite exciting what can be done. But I think in practical terms there's some caution that's got to be required with that. We're now basically asking the public to subsidise every form of energy generation, whether it's renewables, whether it's nuclear, whether it's gas through the capacity market. If we're telling people they'll pay for what they use and they'll pay for what they don't use, clearly there are some dangers there in how the public might perceive that. We've got to work through those if we're going to make this a success. And finally, on things like tax changes, particularly things like stamp duty and other costs when you're moving home, I think if we move too soon on that, people would frankly, if the retrofit market isn't as developed and mature as we need it to be, they'll simply see that as an extra tax. And I think, again, that's a danger that we could avoid. My final thought is actually that behaviour change is already embedded in some of the best retrofitting schemes that I see, and they're the area-based schemes, the schemes where people see scaffolding going up on a street, they like the work being done, they can go in their neighbour's home, they can experience what the change is that can be provided to them. And actually, that's the part of retrofitting, it's a part of the ECO programme, which is actually developing quite well until the autumn statement when the support was pulled away from that. I think we can recognise some of the benefits in that and try and build on those. And also, when we talk about going for low carbon and power generation, a lot of the conversation is about how can we get technology mature to the point where we won't need subsidy, where we can develop new forms of storage and all that kind of stuff. On house building, we already have that technology. We've had it for quite a few years. I visited Code 6 and passive house developments in places as exotic as Oldham and Sunderland, where social housing providers are already doing this, and actually simply tweeting, telling people that technology exists, that there are people in the UK living in homes like that, has a tremendous effect on people's awareness of energy use and realising that actually, the position they're in most homes is fundamentally worse than it should be. And that's why I think the rollback in the Queen's speech on zero carbon homes, to me, makes absolutely no sense when you look at what is happening on retrofitting and our policy need there. New build should surely be built to as high a standard as possible. We don't even mandate smart meters in new build homes at the minute. I think there's a lot of work that could be done on that, so improving the retrofitting side and on the new build, I think that's absolutely key. But thank you very much for being here, and I look forward to the questions.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. Thanks, everyone. I'll give Greg a chance to come back on some of those points as part of the questions, but I'm going to take two very quick questions. So Greg, hopefully targeted towards Greg, and then he'll have to run off for his next appointment. I'll take the lady at the front and then Stephen in the back. Yeah. Short questions are much appreciated at Policy Exchange. There you go. There's a bit of social planning for you.
Hi, I'm Liz Barker from the Behavioural Architects. I was just interested in, maybe Alex could tell us a little bit about the peak demand response initiative that I think you've recently carried out. I don't know if that's actually on. I hope you heard me.
Okay, I've got it. It's peak demand initiative. We'll come back to it. And then Stephen at the back.
Stephen,
from
the Centre for European Reform. Greg, behaviour change necessary, but shouldn't it be backed up by regulation? And the European Eco-Design Directive, terrible name, but quite an effective regulation. Shouldn't we be doing more regulating?
Greg, do you want to comment on that issue of regulation, Jonathan's criticism of zero carbon homes?
Yes.
Sure.
We should, and if it's long-dated regulation, it can play a really important role in driving innovation. Stephen Chu wrote a fabulous paper, in fact, while he was Energy Secretary, it was peer-reviewed in Science, where he looked at the innovation in energy efficiency over the period since the early 1970s, and actually showed where there wasn't market intervention by government, actually innovation and business plateaued. And where you introduced the right sort of long-dated regulation, actually that was a spur for innovation. Now the challenge is, what is the right sort of regulation? The sort of thing that we've done, that we've pushed for example, on vehicle emissions. I pushed, the UK position was very bold, and we won the day in pushing for really quite dramatic reductions in emissions in both passenger vehicles and commercial vehicles by the early 2020s. If you look at what's happening in consumer products, many of the predicted falls in consumption over the next decade actually are directly attributable not just to measures such as the Green Deal, but actually through the projected savings that will be made from significant increases in efficiency in consumer products driven by EU regulation. I think that is an example of where the right balance of regulation but sufficiently long-dated and ambitious can really make a difference.
But there's also reluctance amongst some of your colleagues, a kind of anti-regulation bias.
Yeah, which is why we have a one in, one out, or two out, one in. There are, for every one good regulation that you can find like this, there are plenty that you can shred from the statute book. I mean, for example, the regulations that have prohibited local authorities from becoming energy companies themselves and supplying energy. That's a regulation that ought to be, properly canned. I mean, there are lots of regulations that inhibit the market, but there are some, such as I think those that Stephen was getting at, that actually can act as a spur to innovation. And we shouldn't be afraid of addressing that market failure.
And what about, just before you go, what about Jonathan's point around some of the criticisms around the Green Deal and Eco, particularly extended measures, the opportunities around extending the potential kind of number?
That's Mandy Rice David said he would say that, wouldn't he? But the fact of the matter is, in terms of the Green Deal, yeah, we've got a long way to go to drive up the finance market. But if you look at the implementation of the Green Deal measures and the Green Deal assessments, that's driving action, driving people, driving behaviour change. It is modest. We've had about 220,000 people who've had Green Deal assessments now, and actually the research into the consumer experience isn't bad. If you look at the independent research that we do quarterly, it shows that between three quarters and 80% of people are adopting the measures that are, or some of the measures that are recommended in their reports, and over 80% of the people who have a Green Deal assessment think it's good, give it a thumbs up, and actually would recommend it to a friend or family. So there are many criticisms that you could legitimately put at the Green Deal of, and we're constantly looking at how we improve it. But I think it was wrong to say that the consumer appreciation of people that have actually had the Green Deal assessment is poor. It's not. It's a very good experience. You're right. Things like eco could be made less bureaucratic. Again, we're looking at how we improve that. But if you compare it to where we've come from certain CESP, which had the nonsense of the CERT scheme, sending millions of light bulbs through the post to people that didn't want them, they just ended up in drawers. You had the CESP scheme, where it was energy companies were spending more money finding customers to actually give the measures to than they were actually spending on the measures themselves. Incredibly bureaucratic. And we've had to steer our way through. It's not perfect yet, but the Green Deal experience, based on their very personalised assessment, shows that once you engage people professionally on energy efficiency, they do respond. The question is, how do you engage more people faster?
I think that's actually...
this is point about...
Yeah, I will. But on that last point, I think I applaud the efforts of the government on the Green Deal, and certainly there are opportunities for improvement. But we've actually directed a lot of regulators from across the world to look at the Green Deal, including in New York State, where it looks like they're going to be adopting it because it's terrific. I actually think that behavior programs can play a large role in driving participation, because you have we've demonstrated in Massachusetts, for example, which offers free assessments like the Green Deal assessments. We've seen a 70% increase in participation in assessments because people are now primed as a consequence of getting better information from their energy suppliers, including National Grid, who has a retail company there, primed to take advantage of these offers. Because rather than just thinking about them as general things that somebody else ought to do, when they learn that they're wasting energy, they're using 30% more than their neighbors, the first thing they want to do is pick up the phone and call to have an assessment to understand what the heck is going wrong, and so how they can take advantage of it. To Liz's question on the peak reduction, last summer, for the first time, we applied our platform to helping specifically reduce consumption at peak, and doing it without additional hardware in the home, taking advantage of the smart meters that have been rolled out, in this case in Baltimore, at Baltimore Gas and Electric and Exelon Utility, and driving personalized communications that were very timely. So the utility would notify us at 5 p.m. in the evening, tomorrow is going to be a peak event. Between 5 and 7 p.m., we then communicated with every customer across the territory, 300,000 customers last year, it'll be 900,000 this year. Greg, tomorrow is a peak event. As a reminder, if you save between the hours of noon and 7, you can earn a rebate on your next bill. Here are the things you can do. And by the second event of the summer, we were able to say, Greg, you saved $12 last event. The average home in your area saved $15. Here are the other things you could try and do this time. And crucially, after the event was over, so we'd measure the savings, and after the event was over, we'd send a follow-up communication again by email, text, voice. Greg, thank you so much for participating. You earned $15. You'll see it reflected on your next bill. What they achieved in Baltimore was a 5% reduction at peak on average across 5 events last summer. It was the equivalent of shuttering 2 diesel generating power plants near downtown Baltimore. So huge cost savings back to consumers.
I think there is still a big problem, actually, or a big challenge of communicating this effectively, because I think it's incredibly exciting. Even the Financial Times, when we ran saying, we're paying factories to close down.
Right.
And the language of, is so gloom-laden, particularly, if that's what the FT, who really do know better, are saying, you can imagine what the Daily Mail are writing.
No, for sure. And that's why I think putting it in context that consumers can understand, this was people. The consumers, the other nice thing that happens, and the suppliers know this, is that when you give people this kind of empowering information, not only do they save energy or save at peak, which helps manage the grid and reduce carbon emissions, but consumers enjoy the experience. Rather than getting only a frustrating experience from their supplier that is asking them for money, they're being given personalized information that helps them save. It's money that stays in their pockets. It improves the relationship they have with the energy supplier. And that's good for a whole host of other things as well.
Okay. I'm going to have to let Greg go before the deck official starts throwing things at me.
Could I just say one thing where I think Jonathan's absolutely bang on, is that as challenging as this agenda is, we can't just keep, with every new problem that we identify, throw more subsidy at it. And it's perhaps unfortunate that energy efficiency has been so late in coming to the party when most people have drunk all the booze. But the fact of the matter is, I think we do need to be all the political parties need to be a lot more creative and thoughtful with the agenda going forward about how do we drive these behaviour changes without just throwing raw cash at them, because one person's subsidy is simply another person's levy on their bill.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Greg. I'm going to take some more questions. I'm going to take that gentleman just there, just at the top. And then we'll take the chat there.
Damien Riley, PwC. So what's clear from discussion so far is that you need very, very precise consumer insight to drive behavioural change successfully. I actually know this point in particular. So if, from a policy intervention point of view, what's the role of government in that, and what's the role of the market in that? And if it's predominantly the market that needs to drive that, then what does the government need to do to enable that to happen?
Okay, David, hold that thought, and then there's a question just down here.
Yeah, David, Overall Energy Saving Trust. How can we make sure that if we do direct government attention and resources or energy company obligation energy and resources towards more activities designed to stimulate behaviour change, that we don't end up with all the activity focused on behaviour changes that at the end of the day are still pretty small. in-home behaviour changes through advice like to save you tens of pounds a year versus the hundreds of pounds that you save through installing hard energy efficiency measures. I'd be quite concerned if, for example, EcoSwitch is supporting behaviour change measures that you know the suppliers would all run off and spend their resources encouraging activities that don't really deliver hard results. So if we are going to do more, try to focus government on behaviour change, how can we make sure that we get the real hard actions that we need to improve what's still a pretty poor UK housing stock?
Alex first.
Let's take the second question first. I think that I don't think behavior change should be privileged above investments in hardware infrastructure. I just think there should be a level playing field. And the suppliers should be rewarded for achieving maximum aggregate savings rather than achieving any particular measure.
My concern is that it's easier to gain those sorts of activities.
Well, I think then, critically, the impact, not the inputs, but the impact needs to be credibly evaluated and verified by an independent third party, so that the gaming doesn't happen. Because it can be gamed with hardware as well, and I'm not interested. You know, gaming shouldn't happen. So people should be held accountable for actually delivering savings. And inevitably, these things are not mutually exclusive. One of the reasons the Toyota Prius is such an effective car and such an efficient car has nothing to do with the drivetrain, the battery, all these, the ugly shape of it, all this helps to improve the efficiency of the car. But the dashboard that tells the driver feedback on how they're driving does quite a bit also. And it's the combination of these things. It's the combination of new technology and hardware in addition to better information that drives efficiency. And I think the same is clearly the case for buildings. This leads to the first question, which is that though I do think the market is going to drive innovation here, if government sets rules which rewards impact and efficacy, then the market will innovate and will come up with better solutions than the solutions we have today to drive that. It gets to the long-term policy making that Professor Chu or Secretary Chu and Minister.
But what about this question, which goes to the point that Jonathan raised and Greg said as he left, that if the product and the kind of behaviours, the savings products are so great, why should government get involved at all?
Because energy is, even in this country where electricity prices are high, energy is a inscrutable and relative and opaque activity. We have a client, the CEO of a utility, who described that he's in the toilet paper business. And I said, "What do you mean the toilet paper business?" He said, "Well, people only pay attention to my product when it isn't there." Even with cars, where the cost of fuel is tremendous, and where each of us who has a car, when you go to the tank to fill it up, you realize how expensive it is, and you know exactly when you use it. It's when you step on the accelerator. Even there, it took government to set high standards for how efficient the vehicles and the fleet needs to be, and then the car companies compete, and consumers can take advantage. And that's with a car, which you buy every 10 or 12 years. With a home, which, I was going to say lasts for 50 or 60 years, but in this country it lasts for 500 or 600 years. There's very little turnover. There's very little transparency. People don't know when they're using power. So it is the role of policymakers to set the agenda, to set the framework, to set ambitious goals, and then allow the market to compete and innovate.
Well, I suppose much like the toilet paper example. I mean, on energy, we're not willing to accept market failure. I mean, we're not willing to have the lights go off. And right now, we would not factor that into our day, wouldn't factor that into our homes. And if you're running a large business with energy needs, you wouldn't be willing to accept that either. So, for me, it's not just about the government setting the rules, although that's clearly important, particularly on regulations on new builds and all the rest of it. But actually, to make this market work, and the retrofit market, despite our rising energy bills, our really poor housing stock, the fact that there are quite innovative, relatively cheap products available, it hasn't worked. And actually, one of the genuinely interesting things about the Green Deal is that I think we would definitely keep, it was that way of finding a way to put the lawn onto the cost, or onto the meter basically. So when you move home, it's there, and you have regulations to make sure, hopefully if you buy that home, it's not going to, be an undue cost. So, clearly there's some space for government to do that, but what you would want is some innovation around, what the best way is to reduce energy consumption in the home, and you'll get that innovation through the market. I mean, I actually think, take the energy system on aggregate, what we've got with all this subsidy going into generation is actually nothing competing in a market environment against that on the other side. We've not got, a coherent policy on interconnection in the UK. We've not got, a kind of demand management side that might compete against that claim drawn subsidy from new generation. So clearly, like most bits of the energy market, there's a clear balance, Damien, between the government and the market, and we need both of them, frankly, to get this right. I mean, David, your point on, behaviour change is relatively small, and there's still big needs in the housing stock. I mean, that's what I was trying to say in my remarks, really. I think we need to look at this. We need pilots. We need to sort of particularly expand this in industry, but let's not be distracted from the fact that fundamentally our housing stock needs a systematic increase in retrofitting, and actually, we've not increased this at the pace we need for affordability. We've not done it on anything like the pace we need to meet our climate change obligations, and simply, that is a compelling case to make alongside some of this quite exciting stuff as well.
I'd highly recommend the report on interconnectors published by Policy Exchange last week.
Yes, it's on my reading.
I'll take the chap there and then the chap in the... And actually, I'll take the three. So I'll take Jenny and then we'll go across.
Hi, Jonathan Graham from the Combined Power Association. When we're talking about energy use in UK homes, we're really talking about heat. It's about 80% of energy costs in UK homes is heat, and most of that is gas. And the way that we address that is through switching to renewables or through insulation investments. And both of these are efficiency investments, and both of these are very expensive at the minute, especially in hard-to-treat homes or current renewable heating options. My question is, we sort of have, and we talk about behavioural consumer behaviour at the minute, we sort of have an all-the-above policy at the minute, where a consumer has the choice to access any of these.
Can you get to a question?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I'm quite aggressive on this.
No. So we have an all above. Consumers can access any of these policies, even if they're not the most cost-effective policy. Is there a way the government can help nudge consumers to more cost-effective choices, and not simply get the domestic RHI, even though that might be more expensive than insulation, or take insulation that's more expensive, or any other efficiency investment?
Okay, take the question there, Jenny. And then we'll go to the chap who's in the...
Hi, I'm Jenny Banks from WWF. Mainly a question for Alex. Just wanted to know what your views are on the capacity market, whether it's a hindrance to demand reduction, getting in the way, or whether it can help at all.
And the question there, the chap in the blue shirt towards the back.
Thanks. Martin Brough from Deutsche Bank. All the discussion has been how politicians and companies can nudge consumers, but can we have a bit better policies for consumers to nudge politicians and companies? Because there seems to be a big lurch in policy in the autumn when we realised that customers were fed up with bills. If customers had better mechanisms to nudge the politicians, wouldn't we have more efficiency in policy making?
Do you have anything in mind?
Well, smartphone apps and things might have ways in which consumers can give feedback on a micro level rather than just at every election.
Okay. Jonathan, I'll start with you. So we had focus on cost. How can we get a more focus on cost-effective measures? The issue of the capacity mechanism from Jenny, and then how can we get consumers to nudge politicians?
Some thought required for that. Yeah, Jonathan. I mean, as you know only too well, the dichotomy between power and heat, is one of the least understood parts of energy policy. It's probably the epitome for me right now is the debate around shale gas, and people saying we don't need shale gas, we'll have renewables, without really understanding what that actually means as a statement. I think what makes heat particularly interesting to this is the most compelling thing for most people is that they want a warm home. They want affordable bills, but they want a warm home. And actually, if we focused, some of the best fuel poverty work that's been done hasn't been on people, going into homes and saying, can we reduce your emissions, or can we bring your bills down? It's saying, is your home warm enough? Would you like it to be more livable? And actually, it's why heat is so important. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around electrifying heat. If that's where we want to nudge people towards. Most people's memory of electric heating is really old-fashioned electric heating rather than heat pumps, and that's quite difficult. And the costs, let's be honest, the costs are quite prohibitive in the home. If you did it really because you're socially minded to do that rather than because your running costs are going to come down. So we need, a mechanism that frankly, is technology blind, but makes that available if the costs become possible to do that. And I think you do that by, getting the finance off or getting the demand systems in place and actually then seeing what the market can do to provide that. I'll leave the capacity market to Alex, seeing as it's a whole set of different issues.
Labour doesn't have a view on the capacity
market? You can see the dodge there. We're in favour of the capacity market. I think it's, at the minute for me, the questions are, is it there to keep stuff online that we might need, or is it there to incentivise new generation? I don't think if it is there to incentivise, new gas generation, it's working, because the only one that's been built has been built without that. And actually, perversely, what you've got at the minute is people perhaps not bringing forward investment because they want a slice of the capacity market. So perversely, the government's capacity market may be reducing capacity, which is a little bit of a problem. And I think, I will look at your report on interconnection certainly, because as you know, I think we've got to have a discussion there. Perhaps we can't just have a series of energy islands across Europe. We've got to think perhaps a bit more imaginatively about that. And frankly, the costs of the capacity market are very large. There's no doubt about that. That's in there. On nudging politicians, I think get to recall and all that, which I'm quite in favour of. But I think the reasonable point you're getting at is, in all of this, the dramatic change in the policy, the eco policy, just before Christmas in the autumn statement. Again, it's there's a consistent story here where people are making investment decisions that are undermined by political decisions being made, and I can understand why that's entirely frustrating. And I think, frankly, that probably what happened when eco happened, because the Prime Minister said something at the Prime Minister's questions that he couldn't back out of, and that's extremely regrettable.
Alex.
If I knew how to get the population to nudge politicians to do the right thing, I'd probably be somewhere else.
You'd be still in politics.
But I applaud any efforts. On the first question, I think that engaging consumers with better information, having them more engaged, not just in a toilet paper way, but in an actual positive way and an empowering way, will inevitably lead to smarter and better choices about not only how energy is used, but the investments that are made inside the home. Comes to capacity markets, certainly supportive of a Europe-wide market here. In the example I gave in answer to Elizabeth's question, the first question in Baltimore, that was enabled because PJM exists as a capacity market and rewards demand reduction in the same way it rewards new generation. So I don't know the details of what's wrong or what's right about the markets here, but as you look across Europe, and you will have increasing renewables with or without changes to energy policy, and those renewables will be intermittent. There's going to be increasing role for demand response to play, and for demand side management generally to play to keep the lights on.
Okay, take a question there and a question one. The three questions just there.
Jeremy Thomas, interested spectator. What if the assumptions behind this nudge theory, of which we have recently heard so much, turn out not to be so valid as they might have been supposed? I am thinking in particular of Gert Gigerenzer of the Max Planck Institute for Human Cognition in Berlin, and his critique of works such as Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, that they place too much emphasis upon biases and fallacies in the analysis of human behavior, and underestimate the human capacity for critical reasoning.
Okay, and then we'll go behind, and then next.
Hi, my name's Alex Chesterfield. I'm from Which, the Consumers Association. My question is, obviously energy consumption comparative data works, but to what extent do those effects last over time?
Okay, that's the sustainability of the savings, and then David, just in front there. No, sorry, take the question at the front there.
Hi, my name is David Homer. I help people switch energy as part of my job, and we've talked about this before, but I have found that if you want to nudge people, if you want to help them switch, you've got to send them the data, you've got to send them their usage figures. And I think, and I know that you can underline, ask for them, and smart meters make it easier, but people are lazy. And so if you send it to every 6 months, every 6 months, every 3 months, just saying, no bills, nothing else. This is your usage data. More people will switch. I'm absolutely convinced.
Okay. Do you want to come in on that, Alex, first?
Yes.
So,
Sure.
kind of the nudge backlash, crucially the sustainability.
Sure. And these are related questions. Look, if it turns out to be wrong, then you should shut it down. The good news is that we've been at it combined 350 years of programs across now nine utilities, or 95 utilities in 8 countries. Nearly every one of our programs is run in traditional experimental design, the kind that Max Planck himself would have liked and the kind that all of us learned in grade school, which is to say, when we run a program, including the programs we're running at First Utility and at E.ON, we take a population of people, we randomly remove a control group to whom we don't communicate, and we communicate to the other customers. And we're measuring the difference in impact, the difference in energy consumption between the consumers who receive the information and the consumers who don't. If you do this across a large enough population, if it's truly randomized, then you can have measurable results. If it turns out you don't get measurable results, then it doesn't work, and so you can remove the program. And I certainly would suggest you do. And this gets to the sustainability of the program. When we started, I'm an optimist, my co-founder is a pessimist. It helps to have different people working together. When we started, I was quite confident, having read the behavioral science literature, that this would work. He was less confident. But we set it up in a experimental design control group, and 3 months in, we were beginning to measure energy savings. And I was relieved, and I said, see, Dan, it's going to work. And he said, well, it's worked for 3 months, but is it going to work for 6 months? I think he's now over the hump, because we're more than 6 years into our longest running program. The savings persist so long as you continue to communicate with customers, so long as you continue to bring new innovation and new insights to consumers. We've also seen what happens, because we've run experiments. If you stop communicating with customers, do they return to their old behavior? And over time, they do return to their old behaviors, and so the savings dissipate. But you can, from a cost justification perspective, continue to run the program. To the question around switching, to me, I'm pleased that you have choice here. I think it makes sense to have choice in competition, but I think the health of the market shouldn't be about churn rate and switch rates, but rather the health of the market should be judged based on how, and Minister Barker talked about it as a measurement, how productive is your economy for the energy it takes? How much energy waste are you eliminating in the economy? So if an energy company were to come out with a great set of services that helped its customers dramatically reduce their energy consumption in a way that's delivered savings and delivered reliability, I would hope that they'd have loyal customers. And I think that the market would be healthy. So I think engaging consumers inevitably leads to switching, because there are bad actors and there are better actors. But I think ultimately that the value of this information should be to drive wiser and smarter use of energy and better investment in technology and in infrastructure, not necessarily that the chief outcome should be to switch suppliers. But happy to discuss this further.
Well, I was just going on Jeremy's point, because I mean, yes, so the fundamental question, what if all this is, doesn't work? I think actually in energy policy, there's certainly nothing wrong with, in fact it's quite sensible, to look at the most sophisticated kit, how much will be the person using it, because we do talk a lot about measures, and actually considering how the person uses it is absolutely fundamental. I mean, one of the concerns I always have is a lot of our programs are predicated on models of energy consumption in the home, which actually are fairly dated. They go back quite a few years, but frankly, they're what we've got, and we've got to find a way of working with them rather than trying to drop a whole new set of rules for the game. I think actually this is an area where there's quite a lot of innovation is possible. I mean, when you have insulation measures fitted in the UK, they're subject to an in-use factor, and that affects the financing of the Green Deal and what you get in that. I think you can have product-specific in-use factors. You can look at the quality of build and put them in. You can try and get some innovation in those sectors by rewarding them in terms of the financing you'd receive that would follow that. So for me, it's quite sensible, and actually, we would make the mistake if we weren't looking at this and just looking purely at measures.
Okay, just going to take that gentleman's question, otherwise I think I might get lynched. Quickly,
I'm
yeah.
not sure that's
Quickly.
Yeah, okay. The interesting point about tonight, I thought, was basically would consumer behaviour change things. I wasn't aware that consumers did things on a party political basis, but there seems to be a lot of chat on that on the stage. Interestingly, I thought most of the audience were engaged on the basis of the technology that our American friend brought out and the Nest information that Craig mentioned. And actually, we're not really interested in saving energy, we're interested in the result. And the result comes from the technology that you explained about text saying, just say 12 quid, but you want to do it again. And the idea of putting people in control through the Nest. And there seems to be a lot of debate and a lot of information about party political grounds, but not about what consumers actually wanted. And that, I thought, the behavioural change was what we're talking about tonight. Cool.
Do you want to comment on that, Jonathan?
Well, I think the point about some of that is that you need government policy in such a way as people can take advantage of that, do it in that way. I mean, I think the points around the smart meter programme, you know, if that comes off in the way it could, that could be the most exciting way to take advantage of that technology, because you could have people being able to set their household budgets by apps, you could have devices communicating with each other. But clearly that won't happen by itself. I mean, you need action at the government level to make sure people get smart meters, to roll it out. What I always say is, you know, the smart meter programme, it's a bigger budget than the Olympics. I mean, this is not a small deal, and you know that requires, frankly, government to deliver that so that consumers can take advantage and then change their behaviour.
Is Labour nervous about the speed and scale of the smart meter programme?
I think any large budget, government IT budget, you should have some degree of caution in it because of the history of those things. I, pay a real particular focus on it. Obviously, I think it can be done quite well. I think it's a fairly complicated landscape of different contracts and how it will roll out. But the crucial thing is, as it is rolled out at a mass level, that those costs don't start to escalate in an acceptable way. But you can only do that when the programme is being run in action.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good conclusion and insight that policymakers here and everywhere should be focused on results and what actually drives consumer behavior. And it will justify, if you do that, if you focus on that and focus on outcomes, then it will make the smart meter rollout successful. And just as a interesting sort of piece of data to bring back to the conversation, everybody has talked about the Nest and people do love them. But to date, the independent studies about whether the Nest actually drives energy reduction have been conclusive that it does not. It makes people more comfortable. It gives people the sense of control and convenience, but it does not drive energy savings. And so that isn't to say that a smart thermostat couldn't, or that even Nest and Google won't figure it out. But again, I think it's pretty good evidence that even a company, and I know Tony, and as talented as Nest and as talented as Google, they're not right now being incented to drive efficiency. They're being incented to build a product that consumers want. Those are different things. And so I think the focus should be on driving outcomes that are good for policy and good for the economy and the environment.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. We're going to end it there. I'm going to go and compose a blog on why the energy market is like toilet paper industry. But I'd like to invite you all to thank the panelists for what's been excellent.